This week we're talking about control flow, and what control flow really is conditionals and loops and other types of statements which allow us to control what our program does. So before we get started, a couple of announcements. Again, Piazza is a really great resource to be able to ask any questions you might have and to see what questions your peers might have. So make sure you've registered if you haven't done so. Next, we have live group office hours Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. The Zoom info is on Elms. And finally, you can sign up for one-on-one support using this Calendly link. And this link is live in the slides that I've uploaded to support this video. Finally, MCWIC does have tutoring opportunities where you can get one-on-one help. To do that, you're going to click this live link. Again, it's live in the attached slides. All right, so going into today, last week we talked about variable scope. We've described the differences between local and global variables. We've described the benefits of using functions with code. We've written a basic function and called it within our code. We've used arguments, and we've used return statements. Today we're going to talk about if statements and if-else statements, which you've already seen in both online week 1 and online week 2 and in those programming assignments. We're also going to talk about while statements, do while statements, and for loops. But before we get into that, I want to go over a few things that apply to all of these different conditional statements and are just some things that you might see. So in your code, you might see something, you might see a plus plus, so you might see x plus plus, and all that means is x equals x plus 1. It's essentially shorthand for increasing the value of that variable by 1. You may also see minus minus, which decreases the value by 1. We call that a decrement operator. And then there are 4 other assignment operators that you might see. So you might see plus equals, which is, you'd see it written as x plus equals 1. This one is also x plus plus, but x plus equals and then a number, which translates to this. X minus equals a number, which would be x equals x minus 2 in this situation. Times equals, so again, same sort of setup. X equals x times whatever this number is. And then also the modulo sign. So the modulo, if you remember from earlier, is telling us what the remainder is when that number is divided. So in this case, x modulo equals 4 would be x equals x modulo 4. We can write these statements within our code, right? We can write x plus plus or x modulo equals 4, for example, and it just saves us time, right? So for x plus plus, for example, we'd write x plus plus semicolon, that's 4 characters, versus x equals x plus 1 semicolon, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters. So it just saves us time. The other thing that you need to understand as we move into working with things this week is we have this thing called a console. JavaScript has it. It will pop up in your editor, whatever editor you're using. And it allows us to, that should say, see JavaScript errors. So there's different things. Today, we're really going to work with console.log. So console.log, and then within it, we've got a string, and that will print whatever the message is to the console in our IDE. So we'll go over that a little bit more when we get to the programming exercises, but important to know. Okay, so if statements are things that we've already seen, right? We used it in week 1 and week 2 of the online learning. If statement is just a control statement that allows us to make a decision. The very basic form of it is if expression statement, and basically says, if this expression is true, do what's in the brackets. Okay, so the statement is only executed if the expression is true. We also can have if-else statements. So if we have an if-else statement, if the condition is true, it will do what's in the first set of brackets. Else, so if the condition is false, it's going to do what's in the second set of brackets. And if you want, you can use more if-elses. We did this last week, so you might see if condition, else if condition, else. But any which way, the else is always blank. The last else is always blank. You don't have to have a condition in there. Now we can get really fancy and we can do some nested if-else statements. So for example, if we're looking at this code here, a nested if-else statement appears within an if-else statement. So we notice, and this is something to keep in mind, right? We notice in this case that this is nested because it's indented, right? We've used spacing in a way to show you this if-else statement is contained within the else. All right, so let's trace this just so we can kind of see what's up. Okay, so we've set user age to 18, and then we say if user age is less than or equal to 12. Well, 18 is not less than or equal to 12, so we're gonna go ahead and jump to this line here. So console.log, it will print out you are at least 13, and then it will say if user age is greater than or equal to 18, which it is, 18 is greater than or equal to 18, it's also going to print out you are old enough to vote. It's going to skip this else, right, because we've already executed what's in the if statement. So this code would execute with us having you are at least 13, you are old enough to vote, printed out in our console. Okay, so the next thing that we have is we have a switch statement, and a switch statement is kind of like an if-else statement. It's a bunch of if-else statements together. A couple of things to notice with this. So a switch statement compares an expression's value to several cases using strict equality. So this is that triple equals operator that we saw before, right? And it executes the first matching cases statement. If no case matches, an optional default cases statement executes. So again, we see it here, default statement is here. We don't necessarily have to have a default statement, right? We could have no default and it only executes if one of the cases matches. The other thing that you'll notice in here is what is called a break statement, and a break statement causes our code essentially to kick out of the code when it hits a break, okay? All right, so let's walk through this switch. So the value is 10. It says, hey, switch 10. It won't run 1, it won't run 5, it's going to run case 10. So the coin is equal to dime, sets the variable coin to dime, and then it breaks, so then it's gonna kick out, okay? And then console.log, it's gonna print out dime. Imagine the value, instead of 10, was 1. The value is 1. We're going to see a 1. So we're going to set coin to penny. And then we're going to kick out of the code. It's not even going to look at the rest of this code. So it'll kick out and come down and print out penny. Now imagine the value was 15. Okay, well, it's going to check. All right, switch 15. 1 isn't right. 5 isn't right. 10 isn't right. 25 isn't right. So here we go. It gets to the default case. It's going to say coin is unknown, and then it's going to print out unknown. The next control statement that we have is a while statement, which allows JavaScript to repeat a set of statements. So this is our first sort of instance of a loop, right? It's going to allow us to go through the same set of code multiple times. If we only had one statement, we wouldn't need these brackets, but it's always good practice to include them. And then the other thing is that we can include other types of statements inside of our while loop. So just so we can see how this works. All right, I equals 1, so we have a variable called I, and it's equal to 1. Then we're going to say, while I is less than or equal to 4, console.log I++. So, let me see if I can do it this way. So let's go ahead and trace through this, okay? So I is equal to 1. So 1 is less than or equal to 4. So we're going to go ahead and go into the while loop. So it's going to print out console.log the number 1. And then it's going to add 1, right, I++, to the letter I. So now I is equal to 2. So console.log is printing out 1. I is now equal to 2. We go back to the top. Is 2 less than or equal to 4? Yes, it is. I'm going to print out the number 2 and then add 1 to I, which makes I 3. 3 is less than or equal to 4, so it's going to print out the number 3, add 1, now it's equal to 4. 4 is less than or equal to 4, yes. So it's going to print out the number 4, add 1 to I, so I is now 5. 5 is not less than or equal to 4, so now it's going to hop out of the loop and come down and print out done. So this loop would result in 1, 2, 3, 4 done being printed into the console. A little bit similar to a while loop, but a do while loop allows us to repeat a set of statements. And the advantage of a do while loop is that a do while executes at least once. Okay, so notice in this case we have, hey, do this, and then we're going to check the condition. So then while I is less than or equal to 4, the semicolon goes after that while loop. Okay, so tracing through this again, I is equal to 1. It's going to print out 1, add 1, so now I is 2. Still good. Print out 2, I is now 3. Still good. Print out 3, I is now 4. Still good. Print out 4, I is now 5. Kick out, done. So this one would also print out 1, 2, 3, 4, done. And then the final thing that we're going to look at is a for loop. A for loop is another iteration statement. The general form is going to be for, and then it's going to initialize the variable, give the test case, and give the expression, and then the statements inside. So this looks like this over here, right? Our initializing is I equals 1. The test is I is less than or equal to 4. And the expression is I plus plus. And then we've got the statement inside. This is basically equivalent to using a while loop where we initialize before the while structure. The test case is inside that set of parentheses, and the expression goes at the end. So same sort of thing, except this is now condensed, and we have our statement inside. Okay, so we've got I equals 1, I is less than or equal to 4, I plus plus. Console.log, the first time it's going to print 1, we're going to add 1 to it. I is now 2, which is less than or equal to 4, print out 2. I is now 3, print out 3. I is now 4, print out 4. I is now 5, kick out to done. So again, the last 3 slides will have the same result. They'll all print out 1, 2, 3, 4 done, but the first one uses a while loop, the second one uses a do while, and the third uses a for loop. The other thing that you can use is you can use trace tables, which will allow you to keep track of values in a program. You've seen these in class. We did them before the break, but it's really helpful in helping you to understand the program's behavior. So this is the trace table for this for loop. Imagine that you would fill it in one thing at a time. So the value of I is 1, which results in 1 being printed out. The value of I is 2, which results in 2 being printed out. We add 1 more. Value of I is 3. 3 is printed out. 1 more. Value of I is 4. 4 printed out, and then we print out done. I highly encourage you to use trace tables, especially early on, just to make sure that you have the right value of your variable. Okay, we can nest loops, so we can combine if, while, and do while statements in several ways. We can have several nested if statements, which we talked about earlier in this little lecture. We can have if statements within while statements, and we can have while statements within if statements. So you can kind of mix and match and figure out what best fits what you need your program to do. Sometimes we can inadvertently create what is called an infinite loop, and that occurs when the expression controlling the loop can never become false. So here's an example. Int x equals 30, while x is greater than 0, document.writeLin li element li and li. And so what this would end up doing, right, x is 30. This statement will always be true. Essentially, it's just going to continuously create a list with an unlimited, infinite amount of items. All right, so after this module, you should be able to describe the differences between the control structures, write and trace if-else statements, write and trace while statements, write and trace do-while statements, write and trace for loops, and nest different control structures. After you've watched this video and you've reviewed the slides, please make sure that you complete the practice problems so you can walk through building different program solutions, and then you'll do the programming project or programming, not project, but programming exercise, and then finally the check for understanding. All right, if you have questions, please feel free to email